back aboard as we continue our World Holiday Spectacular aboard the Regent 7 Seas Voyager. This is part 3 of 7, and in this part we're going to start with a day at sea before finally making landfall on the continent of Africa in Dakar, Senegal. From there we go to Banjul in the Gambia, the smallest capital and smallest country in Africa, before another sea day where we will bring in the new year. We started our day at sea in the usual way with a bit of a workout and then on to breakfast. But in the afternoon, we had what Regent calls the block party. Everyone is invited to leave their rooms just before dinner with wine glass in hand and receive some canapes and wine while waiting for the captain and other senior crew members to come dashing down the hallways, greeting and toasting everyone who came out to play. It's a great way to meet your neighbors and have a little fun. Following that, it was time for dinner once more in the Compass Rose. Tonight with new friends Yan and Meow. Check out our dining and drink guide already published for more on the Compass Rose and the other dining venues. Then it was off to the Constellation Theater for a night with Charlie Cole, a superb and interesting violinist that I am unfortunately unable to show you because of Regent's strict no recording policy. And after the show, it was off to bed, prepare for our first actual landing on the continent of Africa. The next morning brought us to a beautiful sail-in to Dakar, Senegal. Dakar is the capital and largest city of Senegal. The city proper has a population of 1,278,000, and the population of the greater Dakar metropolitan area is around 4 million. Senegal is the westernmost country in West Africa and situated along the Atlantic Ocean coast, and has a total population of around 18 million. Dakar is situated on the Cape Verde Peninsula and is the westernmost point of mainland Africa. Cape Verde was colonized by the Portuguese in the early 1500s and maintained a presence on the island of Gorée just off the coast of the Cape Verde area. Our excursion for today is called the Highlights of Dakar. The passages for this morning were interesting in that they recommended you not eat or drink anything while in Dakar and be on the lookout for petty crime. We found our bus and headed out for our excursion. We were warned that 2 of our listed stops would no longer be had, and the market would be replaced with a different marketplace. Instead, we stopped at the Kermel Market, also referred locally to as the European Market. Interestingly, it has little to do with Europe and bears little or no resemblance to a European marketplace. And at the market, we were treated to sights and smells both exotic and somewhat frightening. Between what looked like a lamb carcass being hung and butchered right there in the middle of the entryway, there were a multitude of people gutting and preparing fish. There were people walking around with squeegees whose only job was to sluice up the blood and guts from the floor. But the marketplace was doing a booming business, and while it seemed a little less hygienic to us, it seems to work for them, so who am I to criticize? Exiting the marketplace proper, we continued on past small stalls featuring dry goods, dresses, and a large variety of other goods, including this lady who had more on her head and in her arms than the inventory of many of the small stalls. And then it was back on our bus, dodging the junk that littered the sidewalks, and back into the jam-packed streets of Dakar. Many parts of Dakar are well maintained and relatively clean, including all of the public parks. It was interesting that a country that is 94.7% Muslim had a Christmas tree prominently displayed in one of the squares. We passed by the presidential palace before proceeding to our next stop. Up was the Catholic Cathedral of Our Lady of Victories. Construction on the cathedral started in 1924 and finished in 1936. We stopped long enough to step inside and take a look at the interior of the cathedral. Overall, the cathedral has a more Art Deco, modernistic sort of vibe that continues on throughout the interior and even into the beautiful but simple stained glass windows. Leaving the cathedral, we were back on the road again, passing the narrow fishing boats used by the Senegalese, and passing down what the locals call Furniture Street. All of this furniture was exposed to the elements and we were told all locally produced. And nearby to Furniture Street, we passed down what was termed Laundry Street, with goats feeding and laundry hanging. We were told locals come here to do their laundry using water from the drainage ditch you can glimpse behind the laundry. Then it was on passing many small stalls full of goods used by the local population. One thing we noted that was that the local population seemed to always have a side hustle going on and would set up business darn near anywhere. Next stop, we stopped at the Great Mosque for a quick visit. While others went inside for a look-see, we stayed outside wondering what this small child, who looked to be about 4 years old, was doing, who was apparently left at the mosque unattended. Or perhaps he wasn't, as there were always people seemingly walking around and around the mosque. From the mosque, we took another ride across Dakar to the African Renaissance Monument. This 52-meter or 171-foot tall bronze statue is located on top a 100-meter hill just outside of Dakar proper. To reach the base of the statue, you have to climb 208 stairs. And while one of us did this very rapidly, trying to show off, the other one of us followed at a more sedate pace. But the payoff to all those stairs was worth it. You receive a spectacular view and vantage point of the statue and panoramic view of Dakar and the Atlantic Ocean. If time allows, it didn't. You can actually go to the top of the statues for a fee using the elevator inside. Construction began in 2006, and construction of the actual statue began in 2008 and was completed in early 2010. The monument remains highly controversial for at least two reasons even today. First of all, the Muslim religion strictly prohibits iconism, especially those realistically sculpted in a semi-nude configuration. Secondly, the giant bronze statues were built at a cost of around 16 to 20 billion of the local francs, or around $20 million US. That was a staggering amount for a heavily indebted and poor country like Senegal. Many, if not most locals, consider the monument a huge vanity project for the then current president. Moving on from the controversy, we stopped at a local art gallery, restaurant, bar, and social club for a demonstration of local sand art. There were other things on display, such as wood carvings, African clothing, African masks, and even some African traditional jewelry. But we were there for the sand painting. Sand in various colors was sprinkled on top of boards covered with layers of glue. And then the sand that was not stuck to the boards by the glue was knocked off with a sharp rap to reveal a picture like this. It was an interesting process, and the results were sometimes actually very stunning. They had many examples for sale between $20 and $40 and some higher, and you were warned, do anything you want, but don't get it wet. If you do, the water-based glue and sand will fall off. And now for something I found very interesting, the car rapides. Car rapides are a sort of misnomer as they are neither rapid or a car. They are instead this little minibus that goes everywhere but goes there slowly and somewhat unreliably. They are often nicknamed the I don't care buses due to their erratic driving, complete lack of set schedules, lack of safety concerns, and unconventional, spontaneous, and sometimes dangerous operating style. They will stop anywhere, change routes spontaneously to avoid traffic, and operate on their own time, acting with little regard for traffic rules, schedules, or conventional public transport norms. In 2017, the Senegalese government tried to ban and eliminate the car rapides, and as you can see today, they were totally unsuccessful. As you progress through the city, one of the more interesting sights is the locals balancing and walking with loads upon their heads, and just going about their everyday life. Next stop was a cultural center where we would be introduced to some African dance. I'm going to shut up and let you enjoy the show. After the dancing that went on for 20 minutes or so, they paused, and for a small contribution, you could get your picture taken with the chief and one of the dancers. From there, and we were off back to the ship, watching as the people and the life of Dakar flowed through the streets. From more balancing acts to crowded local marketplaces, and police doing whatever police in Senegal do, it was a frenetic and interesting ride back to the ship. When we arrived at the ship, we were greeted by this. A line that seemed to stretch from the boarding gangway to almost the end of the ship. All buses seemed to arrive back at the same time and dumped everyone off in the hot African sun. Some people gave up standing in line and just went over to peruse the local market that had been set up next to the ship. More on this scenario in the pros and cons. Back on board, and we decided to check out the lunch menu in La Veranda, and then headed up to grab a light lunch. That meant starting with a small salad before continuing on to a salmon collebac for her, has some nice butter spatzel, country potatoes, and beef stroganoff for me. And then temptation got the best of us, and we both had a piece of this delicious Black Forest cake. We frittered away the afternoon before going once more to the Compass Rose for dinner. Check out our dining and drink guide for more on the Compass Rose and all of the other dining venues aboard the Regent 7 Seas Voyager. Later on that evening, we went up to the observation lounge on Deck 11 for a nightcap. Still in pirate waters, the observation lounge was not much of an observation lounge and was still blacked out. Afterwards, we went up one floor to Deck 12 and stepped out into the darkness. And where everything would normally be lit up like this, there was only pitch blackness. There was one bright spot, so to speak, in that without ambient light, we were able to see the stars for the first time. Well, off to bed we went, and it was time to get ready for our next stop, the Gambia. The next morning brought us to the port of Banjul in the Gambia. We woke up to the sounds of vendors setting up on the dock to greet us as we exited the ship. Banjul is the smallest capital in Africa, and it is capital of the smallest nation in Africa. While English is considered the official language of the Gambia, as in the other African nations, there are many languages spoken here, officially as many as 20. The total population of the Gambia is somewhere around 2.5 million. Today's excursion would be a trip to the Makasutu palm forest. We stepped off the ship and found our bus group, number 15, and boarded, then settled in for the wait as the tour operator shuffled people around between the buses to fill each one. Driving through the island on which Banjul sits, we crossed a bridge and were driving through the dusty streets of the Gambia, passing through several different cities and villages on our way to the Makasutu palm forest, driving down which was probably the main highway of the Gambia. After 25 minutes, we turned off the main highway, and negotiating a tiny dirt road, we finally made it to the Makasutu Cultural Palm Forest. This nature preserve is a private endeavor and the result of the local tribal leaders putting together a tourist enterprise. There is a bar, a restaurant, and a craft shopping area. Our first stop was at the restaurant for a taste of local tea. While we were sitting there, we caught glimpses of the park's other residents, the red monkeys, and the baboons. While the monkeys appeared docile, the baboons were quite aggressive, and this one attacked one of our fellow tourists, snatching some food right from his hands. After sitting there and enjoying our tea, we went for a nature walk with a local guide leading the way. This monstrosity is a termite hill, as is this one. According to the local guide, termite hills could reach well over 3 meters or about 10 feet in height.
You can get access to water.
The land in the forest here ranges from marshy to somewhat arid, requiring elevated walkways to be built over some sections. The local guide kept up a regular chatter about what could be found in the forest, including plants that the locals use for medicinal purposes, such as this leaf, which when chewed gives relief from pain. On we went through the forest, finding more baboons and monkeys at every turn, until we ended up here, an observation tower built with the idea of making the reserve an integrated resort area. At one point, the Makasutu Cultural Forest Reserve was planned to be an integrated resort area. Towers were built, swimming pools installed, and plans for a hotel were drafted. Those plans and the idea of the resort were scrubbed as COVID-19 decimated even the best laid plans worldwide, shutting down travel and disrupting the elders' plans for a resort. Today, the Makasutu Cultural Forest is still functioning, but only as a guided nature reserve with various activities. The observation tower gave us a good view of the roughly 1,000 acres or 405 hectares of the Makasutu Cultural Forest Reserve. We continued on our way, enjoying more and more baboon sightings. Here's another mother baboon carrying her baby papoose style. The forest provides many things for the local villagers, including these palm leaves used for roofing and privacy walls, seen here on a rack drying, And here apparently is where the baboons come to relax after a long, hard day of being a baboon. We stopped for a sample of palm oil wine and a demonstration on how the sap from the oil palm tree is gathered and an explanation of the fermentation process. This gentleman gave us a good demonstration on how they climb the trees and set spikes with buckets to gather the palm oil.
Then you step. So going up, you will pull yourself towards the tree. Your weight will be more on the tree. And you lift it up. You lean back. Take a step.
Always you step strong, yeah? You pull yourself towards the palm tree, yeah? You gallop it up. You can turn around with the belt, yeah?
Okay, when coming down, it's a little bit difficult because the gravity will be forced.
After the demonstration, members of our group were offered the opportunity to try it. We were told not to go above head height, but this gentleman from Germany was determined to climb as high as he could, and he did get up there before he was cajoled and coerced into returning to the ground. How did I like the palm oil wine? Well, not too much. We received the lowest alcohol version, about 1.5%. We were told if left stewing in its own juices, so to speak, the alcohol content would rise to as much as 14%. The wine was mildly off-putting, having a smell somewhat reminiscent of durian, but the taste is, at least in my opinion, better than it smells. Well, it's a good thing he wasn't climbing this tree, which has a nest built by the aggressive African honeybee. With our walk through the forest completed, we headed back to the restaurant at base camp, where they served us our choice of beer or soft drink. After a pit stop, it was time to say goodbye to the restaurant and bar at the Makasuto Forest Reserve, take a walk through their small marketplace, and say goodbye to our local guide before getting back on the bus. And back out that same dirt road we went, checking out the interesting architecture, driving past a local school, and returning to the main highway of the Gambia. Each of the cities and villages had their own markets, and each was hustling and bustling, and in some spots chaotic to the extreme. We were only what should have been about 25 minutes back to the ship, but because of crowding and traffic, our 25-minute trip turned into a 1.5-hour odyssey. Some of the local markets were crowded in the extreme, and some were not. Tiny restaurants catered to the workers of the area, while some of the buildings yielded no clues as to their purpose. After that 1.5-hour ordeal, we were back on the Seven Seas Voyager. A local ferry called the Kunta Kinte was docked beside us, and we followed it out as we left port later in the afternoon. It was pleasant sailing in calm waters as we left Banjul. Tonight we had dinner at Chartreuse, but before we walked in for our reservation, we stopped to listen for a bit to one of our production entertainers doing a bit of a solo turn.
And if I ever hurt you know I hurt myself.
Listening for a few minutes, we entered Chartreuse for our reservation. Chartreuse is one of the 2 specialty restaurants that require a reservation. However, there is no upcharge for dining at any of these specialty restaurants on Regent. Chartreuse provides an elegant French bistro experience, providing their take on escargot, a beef tartare with caviar topping it, and while she had lobster in this interesting configuration, I had a bit of filet topped with seared foie gras. Perfectly done. Dessert was French cream and berries, and an apple tart with vanilla ice cream. We slipped up to deck 12, and although we were still in pirate waters, they forgot to turn off a few lights. So we retreated to the still blacked out observation lounge for an after-dinner drink. Well, the next day was a sea day and New Year's Eve. After a quick workout and checking out the glassy, calm seas, it's time for a bit of breakfast at our favorite breakfast stop, La Veranda. Song collected some nice squirrel food while I browsed the veranda and ordered 2 glasses of fresh squeezed grapefruit juice, and she returned with her idea of a healthy breakfast while I returned with mine. We caught a lecture in the morning, and then in the afternoon while I was editing, Song decided it would be a good idea and go out and find a blue Hawaii. And so, frittering away the rest of the afternoon, we found it was time for dinner once more, and we changed into our New Year's finest, and once more checked out Compass Rose. Everything was delicious this evening, and while she went with a sake and miso glazed salmon with some coconut sticky rice, I opted for a tasty and perfectly prepared surf and turf with a bit of filet and lobster. And after dinner, it was time to wander around a bit, looking the ship over and admiring the atrium, now dressed up for New Year's. We had had dinner with new friends, Keith and Judy, and walked upstairs with them to have a drink in the observation lounge. And soon enough, it was time to join the New Year's celebration in the atrium.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Say adieu to the old year and ring in the new year, it was time to consider going to bed and get ready for another sea day. Well, that's it for part 3. Thank you for watching. Please do us a solid, like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be kept up to date with new videos as they release. And as they say, but wait, there's more. Part 4 is on the way. Another relaxing sea day before making landfall on the Ivory Coast in the port of Abidjan. Then on to Sekondi in Ghana, Lome in Togo before enjoying another relaxing sea day. Thanks for watching. Safe and happy travels from T's Cruise and Travel Muse.